Buenos dias!
In the 1980s, teen comedies ruled the multiplexes. Movies like The Breakfast Club, Fast Times at Ridgemont High, and Valley Girl lit the screen on fire for crowds of the newly minted mall generation. The film spoke to that generation and kept them laughing the entire time. In 1985, a new filmmaker hit the scene and was able to recruit a young up-and-coming star to be in his quirky black comedy dealing with something everyone can identify with: heartbreak.
Hey. I'm fine.
Better Off Dead has become a cult hit, but it wasn't without some bumps in the road, both during and after filming. So let's find out exactly what the fuck happened to this movie. Steve Holland, affectionately known as Savage Steve Holland after he kicked a kid in the teeth during a soccer game, had some buzz coming out of film school for his student project Going Nowhere Fast, where it was exhibited at the Museum of Modern Art. His first job was animating the whammies on the game show Press Your Luck. Most would remember how contestants would yell out, no whammies, stop, as they pressed their button to get it to stop on the prize they wanted. If they were unfortunate enough to get a whammy, then little red guys would come out of the screen and cause mischief in one form or another. Outside of this, Holland was still making short films and had one called My 11-Year-Old Birthday Party play at the LA Film Festival. One person in attendance who loved the short was Henry Winkler. Yes, the Fonz loved his film, and when he learned that Holland was getting ready to direct his first feature film, he said he should check out John Cusack in The Sure Thing. Winkler had produced the film and thought Cusack would be perfect for the lead role. Holland agreed and quickly got a hold of him. Cusack agreed to be in the film and they were all set. At least they thought so. The studio didn't exactly see Cusack as a leading man after seeing him in films like 16 Candles, where he played a geeky sidekick. Holland fought back, saying that Cusack would be perfect for the role. After going back and forth and not seeing a compromise, the studio finally gave in. Better Off Dead was on its way.
How come? 'Cause I'm the Fonz, huh? Hey!
In the film, Cusack plays Lane Meyer, who was just dumped by his girlfriend. He laments their broken relationship as he decides on multiple occasions to kill himself. Each time, he fails miserably and quite hilariously. Around all this, he has to do the things teenagers usually do, like homework, finding a job, and getting challenged to a downhill ski race by the jock bully of the high school who's also now dating his ex-girlfriend.
I was wondering if you would mind if I took out Beth?
You know, teenage stuff.
This is a bit awkward.
The film is loaded with dark comedy that also somehow leans into a slapstick nature that works perfectly. A few notable things in the film are Lane being stalked by the local paperboy who wants the $2 he's owed, being followed by two exchange students who want to race him but only speak like Howard Cosell from the Wide World of Sports, and finding out that his younger brother can pick up women better than he can. It's a quirky movie. Holland made sure to surround Cusack with some fun supporting characters that really push the quirkiness of the film. Diane Franklin plays a French foreign exchange student that lives across the street from Lane. Her French accent is pushed to the hilarious extreme that she keeps confusing words that sound familiar. As Lane's best friend Charles DeMar, Curtis Armstrong was cast fresh off Risky Business and Revenge of the Nerds. Charles is the strange guy that you see wearing a top hat for no reason but is unshakably loyal. He's able to laugh off the bully's insults so well that it leaves them confused what to do next, and he probably has the best quotes of the entire film. His ski lessons are something we live by. Fans of Head of the Class will recognize Dan Schneider as the weirdo next door neighbor Ricky. His mother signed him up to host an exchange student in their house just so he might have a shot at getting a girlfriend. She practically pushes them into an arranged marriage throughout the movie, but thankfully she's able to escape that horrendous living situation by helping Lane soup up his Camaro.
Peanut butter jelly time.
The biggest mystery of the film is Lane's brother Badger, played by Scooter Stevens. He has no lines in the entire film, but comes off as an intriguing figure. He's been cutting the backs off of all the cereal boxes in the house to send away for prizes. This causes numerous messes throughout the house. Before we even find out what that even amounts to, we see a horrible mailman delivering him a book he sent away for on how to pick up trashy women. Later, we see him hosting a social gathering in his room with a bunch of ladies that are older than he is. Finally, it's revealed that with all the cereal boxes mailboxes, he is somehow able to build a rocket ship that bursts out of the family home. This Badger is truly a man of mystery that could rival James Bond himself. Savage Steve Holland has said that most of the film is weirdly autobiographical. His high school girlfriend actually left him for the ski team captain, and he was suicidal for a short time. He says he went into his garage and put an extension cord over a pipe. As he stood on a plastic garbage can wondering if he really wanted to go through with it, the lid on the can broke. He fell, but the pipe also broke. Water began to pour down from the broken pipe, and now he was lying in a garbage can that was about to fill up with water as his mom came out to yell at him for breaking the water pipe. He saw the hilarity in the situation and began to write down all the dumb ways suicides could fail. These ideas became the idea for Better Off Dead. To help everyone feel better, his ex-girlfriend did call him after the film came out and apologized to him.
Man, now that's a real shame when folks be throwing away a perfectly good white boy like that.
Another aspect that seems so far-fetched that it couldn't have been true was the psychotic paperboy. But in real life, he also had a paperboy that would harass him for $2. Surely he didn't go to quite the lengths the fictional one did, but the actor who played the paperboy made sure he took it very seriously. When Damian Slade came into audition, he wore a leather jacket and made himself look as menacing as possible. He said he approached it as if he was a serial killer, dead serious with no intention of making it funny, and it worked perfectly for the part. Holland's mother also liked to experiment with her cooking. He said she was constantly trying to make new meals from recipes she got out of McCall's magazine. They would taste really bad, and she would always have an excuse that she forgot an ingredient or replaced something that they didn't have. Here's hoping that the raisin goop we saw in the movie was an exaggeration. One thing that wasn't an exaggeration was that his mom had actually given him TV dinners for Christmas one year. She said it was because she knew he liked the peach cobbler in that specific one. As they were filming, they still hadn't filled the role of the jock bully. Holland was in his office looking at some dailies when a blonde-haired guy walked in. He took one look at Steve and asked the casting agent, "Who's the fat surfer?" Holland was stunned and asked who this guy was. He was introduced to Aaron Dozier, who was coming in to audition for Roy. Steve looked at him and said, "You have the part. You're perfect." Not a good idea to insult your director, but I guess it depends on the part you're auditioning for. One thing Holland wanted to include in the film was during the period when Lane is working at the fast food restaurant. When Holland worked at McDonald's, there was a rumor that a rat fell into the fryer and got served to someone. He thought it would be a funny story to put in the film, but his producer said it was just gross and not funny. Instead, he came up with the claymation scene of the hamburger playing guitar to Van Halen's Everybody Wants Some.
Get some, baby! Get some! Get some!
It was a weird scene in the movie, and not everyone thought it was a good idea. But when it came time to test the movie, that scene tested higher than anything else. Holland ended up being a studio's dream as the movie came in under budget and under schedule. Cusack enjoyed his time on the movie so much he signed up for Holland's next film, One Crazy Summer. That film went into pre-production as they were editing Better Off Dead. Once the film was locked, they held a special screening for the cast and crew. After 20 minutes, Cusack got up and left the theater enraged. The next morning, he walked up to Holland and said it was the worst film he had ever seen. He felt that Holland had lied to him about what the movie was supposed to be, that he could never trust him as a director again and never speak to him again. Steve asked what was wrong, but Cusack said that he sucked as a director and that he used him. Holland was so shocked by this as it seemed to come out of nowhere. Cusack did finish One Crazy Summer because he was contractually obligated, but wasn't happy during the filming. The question then is, what movie did he feel like he was making? A crazy paperboy asking for his $2, exchange students trying to drag race him, and Raisin Goop literally walking off his plate should have been a clue to the film's tone. Despite all this, during a 2013 interview, Cusack stated he didn't hate the movie or making the film. He said he wishes some things were better, but also feels this way about all of his movies. All said and done, Cusack is happy that the movie has fans and a cult audience. He never did work with Holland again after One Crazy Summer, though. The film ended up being a modest hit. On less than a $4 million budget, it ended up with a box office of just over $10 million. For 1985, that's not too shabby. Critics weren't huge fans, though.
And this is one of those movies where you sit there saying, not only do I know what's going to happen, but it's going to be so boring that I won't even be amused by the fact that I knew it was going to happen.
On an episode of Siskel and Ebert, the two derided the film, saying it was a formulaic teen comedy. Both said they wished they could forget the movie entirely and felt that it had nothing to say. Then,
you see that the window broken once, you see it broken twice, you see it broken 3 times.
That's the whole pattern of the movie. What did this director think was funny? Doesn't that director realize that we all know it's going to break again? That that's stupid, and that he makes himself look stupid?
When they showed a clip, it was a strange scene where Lane's mom is serving dinner in honor of Monique's French nationality. She serves French fries, French dressing, French bread, and Perrier water. This as Ricky's mom accidentally drinks kerosene and blows up the dinner table when she goes to light a cigarette. That old story we've seen time and time again.
The film, this kid who rides by every day breaking the window is even in the last shot of the movie as if he has some kind of Fellini-esque alter ego. Don't use the word Fellini anywhere near this film. I'm sorry. I really must apologize to Fellini and to Eugene for doing that.
The Miami Herald was less harsh than the others, but said it had, quote, the body of a tired teen comedy but the soul of an inspired student film. Since its release, it has gained that cult following. It seems that time has caught up with the film, as it now sits at a solid 87% on Rotten Tomatoes audience score. Maybe the adults at the time didn't know how to deal with this movie, but the younger generation remember it as a fun, dark satire of love in high school. The film hasn't aged as badly as some of its contemporaries from the time period, but some problems have nothing to do with the movie itself. While this piece of information isn't directly tied to the film, it does cast a dark cloud over anything Dan Schneider is involved with. Schneider would go on to be a cast member on the sitcom Head of the Class. From there, he would get into writing and producing. Most famously, his company, Schneider's Bakery, would work closely with Nickelodeon to create some of the most recognizable shows on the network, like All That, Kenan and Kel, The Amanda Show, and iCarly. For the last decade or so, there have been rumblings that Schneider was abusive on set with the actors and production team. When asked about the accusations, he said if he had been rough with people on set, it was because he had high expectations as a showrunner. Multiple people complained about his attitude and his weird habit of posting pictures of his young star's feet on Twitter. There were rumors for years that more could have been going on behind the scenes, but nothing has been confirmed. In 2018, Nickelodeon finally cut ties with Schneider and his company after an internal investigation found multiple issues dealing with Schneider's temper toward his coworkers. Schneider was prone to temper tantrums and angry emails when he didn't get his way. Nothing of sexual nature was found during the investigation. Other actors and employees would come forward after the investigation was over and claim that there was a lot of gender discrimination. He would constantly ask female employees for massages. Someone close to Schneider says that Dan regretted asking for such things as he realized it was inappropriate. Even with these few dark behind-the-scenes issues, Better Off Dead remains a cult classic from the 1980s. This quirky and somewhat dark film has brought joy to so many over the years. At least we can all rest easy knowing Lane didn't end up killing himself and found the girl of his dreams, even though she probably had to go back to France not long after the movie ended. I don't know. What happened then?
What would you like to say to the people of the 21st century, huh?
You very likely will become a big star from risky business. Are you ready to handle teenage adulation?
If people thought Tom Cruise had fallen out of fashion as a movie star, they had to rethink that statement entirely when Top Gun Maverick grossed almost $1.5 billion at the box office this year. It was the biggest gross for any movie he's ever been a part of. While it's no surprise that his films make box office gold, this one cemented his legacy as the biggest movie star in the world. What people may forget is that it wasn't always that way. Early in his career, he played bit parts in movies like Endless Love and Taps. The very first time he got top billing was in a movie that most people have forgotten about. A quirky sex comedy called Losin It came out in 1983, but soon faded from memory. While it made the cable TV rounds in the mid-80s, it failed to make any sort of mark, especially in the storied career of Tom Cruise. That could be because his star-making role in Risky Business would be out in 6 months, so what happened to this forgotten film from Tom Cruise's resume? Let's find out. What the fuck happened to this movie? Cruise had booked a few films, but he hadn't quite made that jump to leading man. He had it in his mind that he was going to be able to act for the rest of his life, and he set out to find out the best movies he could expand his depth as an actor. His agents at the time gave him all sorts of projects to jump into so he could get work as an actor, but Cruise was being selective. Rumor is he turned down an opportunity to be in the movie The Amityville Horror 3. Maybe he did have a knack for driving his career forward after all. He was given a script for the movie Losin It, and his agents told him him to go for it. Even though he didn't really like it, he decided to go ahead and make the film since his friend Jackie Earle Haley would be one of the leads. The film was yet another teen sex comedy that had become so popular after films like Meatballs and Quirky had scored big at the box office. This new genre had been a big hit and made the studios tons of money. Every film company wanted a teen sex comedy. This would lead to a flood of horny teenagers showing up on the screen. Cruise was uncomfortable with the subject matter, but was more upset that the movie just wasn't all that good on the page. He was going off of his focused plan of how he wanted to present himself as an actor. He would later say in an interview, "Then my agents at the time wanted me to do Losin It, which was a teenage sex film. I felt uncomfortable with the subject matter, but the agent said, do it, it's good for your career." As it turned out, it was, because I learned a lot of things, including what kind of movies to avoid. When I first read it, it was worse than the released film. I worked hard, but it was a terrible time in my life. Ouch. In Losin It, Cruise plays Woody, alongside Haley as Dave, John Stockton as Spider, and John P. Navin as Wendell. They decide after school lets out that they should drive down to Tijuana, Mexico to fulfill their most primal urges. Woody is usually a straight-laced guy, but he finally wants to lose his virginity. The others decide to tag along to get into their own sort of fun. As they stop by a local grocery store to stock up on snacks for the ride, they witness the shop owner and his wife get into an argument after she finds out he's been cheating on her. As the guys are leaving with their shoplifted items, the wife Kathy, played by Shelley Long, jumps into the car with them and decides to travel to get a quickie divorce from her soon-to-be ex-husband. Once they all cross the border, Dave drops his car off to get some work done before everyone ventures off. Wendell is tasked with staying with the car to make sure the mechanic doesn't do anything against Dave's wishes for his precious car. Eventually, Wendell gets tired of this and wanders off on his own to fulfill his own desires. Fireworks. But he wants to buy a bunch of illegal fireworks and then take them back to his middle school so he can sell them to all his classmates for a high profit margin. Dave, Woody, and Spider end up at a brothel, but Woody can't go through with all of his original plans. Later at the bar, Spider and Woody get into an argument after Kathy finds them after a trip to a divorce lawyer. This causes everyone to split up and go on their own adventures. Spider seeks out a donkey show, don't ask, but gets into a bar fight with some US soldiers on leave. He ends up thrown into a Tijuana jail. Woody and Kathy walk around discussing what they both really want out of life. Dave and Wendell end up getting chased by a bunch of local thugs after Dave makes a big mistake with one of their sisters. This all culminates with them meeting up once again in order to escape the local authorities and get back over the border into the United States. The film itself is nothing special. There are better sex comedies made before and after this film came out. One of them came out right before and tackled almost the exact same plot. The Last American Virgin had a group of teenagers who want to lose their virginity, so they find a sex worker willing to help them out. The film then covers the consequences of becoming an adult in a much darker tone than Losin It. It just doesn't have the heart that other films would end up gaining from their subject matter. The New York Times said, quote, "The film would have had certain unity if it had remained on the opening note of uncomplicated foolishness." And they're correct. The opening of the film would give the viewer reason to believe that what we're about to see is a hilarious road trip movie that might end up with a little heart. The boys are planning the road trip to Mexico only to find out that one of them can't go. It's revealed that he told his parents about the trip and they grounded him. We're shown that Haley's Dave can't put up with this nonsense and takes his anger out on a poor trash can nearby. When others start to reveal their own bad news, he again takes it out on the trash can. This leads viewers to believe that Dave will be a quirky character with interesting reactions that we'd be seeing throughout the runtime. But this is really the only time we're given anything this exciting. He does fine in the rest of the movie, but lands more of an aloof character who's searching for Spanish Fly. Again, don't ask. This leads to other, more modern problems in the film. The men in this film are obviously obsessed with sex and what it means to them to score. Pretty much every woman in the film is only there to be a possible conquest of every man in the film. Even Shelley Long's character, Kathy, doesn't really have that much to do throughout the film. She leaves her cheating husband to go to Mexico to file for divorce. Once there, she then becomes a background character until she and Woody go off on their own. Then, her job is to let him know that he doesn't want to sleep with a prostitute. He wants a wholesome girl like the one he left back home. But before that can even register as a character arc, Woody and Kathy get a hotel room and sleep together, fulfilling his initial mission of going to Mexico in the first place. After Woody learns his important lesson, and more importantly loses his virginity, she ends up seeing her cheating husband has come down to Mexico to look for her because he wants her back. She happily runs directly back into his arms. This destroys any agency she had in the film. It shows that all she needed to do was forgive him for being a cheating jerk. All of her problems would be fixed. The other big problem is Dave searching for the elusive Spanish fly, a pill that will make any woman ready to throw themselves at him. Characters keep telling him that it's not a real thing, but he insists it is. When a local conman convinces him he can get him some, he doesn't hesitate a bit to take him up on that offer. It's obvious to just about everyone but Dave that this guy is ripping him off. When Dave is given the magic pill, he tries to use it on one girl, but the scene plays out as a problematic beat in the modern era. He tries to drop it in her drink without her noticing. While the effects of the pill are supposed to only make her more aroused, it brings up all sorts of awful ideas about how modern date rape drugs are used. This makes Dave less of an endearing, horny goofball and more of a sleazy date rapist. The girl's brother does find out and proceeds to try and teach Dave a lesson, but he's able to escape his captors and return to his ways at a later date. After all, he still thinks he has 5 more pills he can use on unsuspecting victims.
I mean, you come to Mexico to do things you wouldn't do in your own country. Pussies!
Many would be surprised to learn that the director of the film would go on to become an Oscar winner. None other than Curtis Hanson directed this sophomore road trip romp. Even if you don't know his name, you have seen many of his films. He racked up acclaim for films like The Hand That Rocks the Cradle, LA Confidential, Wonder Boys, and the Eminem film 8 Mile. The film has a couple of shots that show that some thought went into them, but overall the look of the film is quite basic. This could attribute to its low budget. Since it was a non-union film with such a low budget, they had to use crew members in certain scenes as actors. Others working on the film didn't want their name on it at all, as it would jeopardize their union standing. They shot the film in Calexico, California, and hired a lot of local people from the area. Some were even given speaking parts in the film. The character of Wendell was originally supposed to be a female character. She was originally just called Wimp in the script. The trade paper Daily Variety listed the part as a female of small stature with definite star quality. They listed child star Christy McNichol as the template for the character. They rewrote it and named the character Wendell, but kept the Wimp in as a nickname for the character. The art department covered up most of the storefronts on the main street with period-looking facades. The film starts with a comedic "a long time ago in a high school not so far away," but doesn't outright state that it actually takes place in 1965. Because of this, the already stretched budget had to accommodate transforming any location into a period setting. Any vehicles had to be changed out. The Model A that ends up in the film was borrowed from local residents, and it ended up being a giant pain. The suspension was so bad by the end of the shoot, the car was dragging on the ground. The crew worked on the film 6 nights a week for 6 weeks. The only night they had off were Sundays, so they would drive into Mexico to go dancing at the nightclub. One night while the cast and crew were blowing off some steam, Tom Cruise began dancing with a girl. Her boyfriend didn't take too kindly to this unknown pretty boy moving in. He slipped on a pair of brass knuckles and started to make his way towards Cruise. Some of the other actors noticed this and ran over to intervene. They were able to grab the actor and pull him out of the nightclub. I wonder if that guy ever realized that he was about to mess up one of the most famous faces in the world. The film debuted on April 22nd, 1983. It pretty much died there as well. It was in direct competition with films like Flashdance, Sony's own teen sex comedy Spring Break, and another film with Cruise in it, The Outsiders. Critics weren't big fans of the film either, stating that while the film had a few interesting moments, it just seemed boring. The film would be released in Brazil as Porky 3 to cash in on the popularity of the Porky's films. This entry must have seemed awfully tame in comparison to the previous films in the series. Even with that push in foreign markets, the movie failed to make much of a dent in its budget. The cost of the film is rumored to have been around $7 million. It would end up making just over $1 million at the box office. It quickly died and was pulled out of theaters only to end up on late-night cable rotation. There may have been enough nudity in the film to justify putting it in the usual raunchy late-night slot, but fans would end up disappointed in the film itself. The film would get the usual home video release, with the latest being a bare-bones Blu-ray release from Kino Lorber. While it isn't the worst addition to the teen sex comedy genre, it also doesn't stand as one of the best either. Cruise would go on to be a mega superstar. Shelley Long would be a TV star not long after on Cheers. Weirdly, John P. Navin Jr. would have the honor of being the first customer to walk through the doors of the bar on the show. He's caught using a fake ID and Sam turns him right away. John Stockwell would go on to other notable 80s movies like Christine, My Science Project, and even re-teaming with Cruise and Top Gun. He would move behind the camera and become a director and producer. Jackie Earle Haley would have his ups and downs in Hollywood, but would finally get recognized as a true talent in the early 2000s with films like Little Children and Watchmen. If nothing else, in the film, we can see Cruise give a performance with some vulnerability and mild depth to him, whereas now all we want is to know what crazy stunt he's going to pull off in the next Mission Impossible movie. Since the legacy sequels are a thing now, maybe we can get the team back together and find out what the guys are up to. Who got fat, who got bald, and who's still searching for Spanish Fly.
Do you remember when fame hit?
Do you remember your life changing?
Yeah, I did, right after Risky Business, and then Top Gun.
I think people are really going to know who Tom Cruise is. Are you ready for what could be instant fame for you?
Yeah, 3-year instant fame. I just try to focus in on my craft, and that's the most important thing in my life.
In 1989, a movie was released that changed the way all films were made going forward. It brought together an exceptional cast, used state-of-the-art special effects, and gave us characters that were poignant and flawed. This movie was the Weird Al starring vehicle UHF. Weird Al's comedic style of parody was on full display for all to see. Anyone that listened to his albums could immediately see his influence on the screen. The film has gone on to become a certified cult classic to generations of fans everywhere. While audiences can now appreciate the eccentric comedy, it wasn't always that way. A movie studio bet on a film to save their company, and Weird Al even clashed with executives over how the film was marketed. Let's find out exactly what the f*** happened to this movie. As we saw in the film Weird, the Al Yankovic story, Weird Al shot to popularity in the early 80s for his kitschy parody songs based on popular hits. After his second studio album, he began to think about how to push his newfound stardom even further. He got together with his manager Jay Levy to figure out a film project he could put together that would showcase his quirky comedy style and push his ideas to a different medium. His music videos had begun to gain as much of a following as his parody songs did. They needed a concept that would let them use the usual comedy that went into those and have a story that could string them together. They came up with the idea that he would be the owner of a low-budget UHF station. This would allow them to create parody skits of popular TV shows and styles and have a way to showcase them that made sense. In the movie UHF, George Newman becomes the station manager of a small rundown TV station. While he tries to keep the station from closing its doors permanently, he's being challenged by another local affiliate. Just as things seem to be lost, he finds a charming host for his children's show that revitalizes the entire station. Before long, the station is flourishing with all sorts of unique programming. This irritates the general manager of Channel 8, who sets his sights on destroying Channel 62 for good. We should take a moment here to explain to those of you in the YouTube generation that older television sets used to work on multiple sets of frequencies, UHF and VHF. UHF stands for ultra high frequency and was a setting on your TV to receive signals from that range. TV stations that ran on UHF could easily transmit to cities not too far from their broadcast tower. Naturally, things like hills or mountains would block and disperse some UHF signals, making it a less desirable way to broadcast. Most TV stations transitioned to the VHF frequency to help their stations reach a wider audience. Those that stayed on UHF usually were low-budget stations that reached a much smaller market. Thank you for watching our edition of Old Man Facts. Now, back to the story. Al and his manager shopped around the script for the film to every studio around. None of them were interested in the film itself. Even with Al's fan base, they didn't see the movie as being something that would make its money back. They set aside the film until a few years later when one of their agents showed the script to a new production company that just started up called Cinecorp. They loved the idea and wanted to work with Al on something. They had an overall deal with the film studio Orion Pictures, and the movie was greenlit. When the film was being written, Al and Levy had specific actors in mind for different roles. Michael Richards was always the first choice for Stanley Spadowski. Al was a big fan of his stand-up comedy and his performances on the short-lived show Friday. Little did he know that it was Michael Richards' stand-up that would ruin his career.
Is your wife at home?
No, she's not.
Oh, good. We're whores.
But that's a video for a different time. When they sent it off to Richard's agent, they were told he wasn't interested as he had just developed a bout of Bell's palsy. They then thought about who else could pull off the character. Al had used Christopher Lloyd's character from Taxi as a partial inspiration for Stanley and thought they could reach out to him.
Hey, you know what? There are initials on this, NZ.
Norman Zelnick.
Who's Norman Zelnick?
I was hoping one of you'd know.
He seemed like he might have the manic energy to give the character life, but they really wanted Richards. They reached out to Richards again just to make sure, and this time he accepted. He loved the character and fell right into it when he showed up to do the test read. Incidentally, the movie would premiere 2 weeks after the first episode of Seinfeld would hit the air. Speaking of, they had offered the role of George's best friend to Jerry Seinfeld, who, of course, ended up turning it down. Guess he was too busy building his own TV show that would rule the airwaves for the next decade. For the alien in disguise TV engineer Philo, Al wanted Joel Hodgson. He had a stand-up routine that included building crazy inventions and saying weird scientific terms. Al thought it would complement the character quite well. Hodgson didn't take the role as he didn't consider himself much of an actor. While he did stand up, he felt it wouldn't translate to performing as a character on screen. He would later decide otherwise when he created and started the original run of Mystery Science Theater 3000. They then turned to an eccentric actor they thought might bring something fun to the role with Crispin Glover. When he read the script, he decided he didn't want to play the character, but instead wanted to play the crazy car salesman who threatens to club a seal in one of the station ads. They were confused by this and explained that Philo was a bigger role, but Glover was set. They turned down his offer of wanting to play the role and moved on. They had run out of ideas and turned to a casting agent to present them with some ideal candidates to audition. The actor they brought was Anthony Geary, who was famous for playing the character of Luke on the soap opera General Hospital. This seemed like a weird choice as his character was the exact opposite of Philo. They wanted his audition and absolutely loved his take on the character. The deadpan delivery and matter-of-fact personality was perfect for what they had in mind. As they were auditioning for the role of George's girlfriend Terry, they auditioned a lot of actresses. Jennifer Tilly and Ellen DeGeneres both auditioned, but they didn't feel they were right for the role. When Victoria Jackson was brought in, they felt her soft-spoken nature fit the character perfectly. For the villain of the movie, R.J. Fletcher, they looked at Kevin McCarthy. He was transitioning out of a serious acting career and was looking to take on more comedic roles. McCarthy may be best known for the original 1956 version of Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Now he was looking to have some fun in the roles he was taking. Al loved him in the role and talks on the DVD commentary that McCarthy would end up breaking out in laughter after some takes where his character was being especially nasty. McCarthy himself later described the character as someone who, quote, makes Ebenezer Scrooge look like Sally Struthers. Fran Drescher ended up being cast for one reason. Her voice was the complete opposite of what a news anchor should sound like. They felt it would be a perfect contrast to what was usually expected of people on television. One person who was supposed to be in the movie but didn't make it was very surprising. As they were writing the scene where George has a daydream that he has to go to rescue Stanley, they decided it would be funny to show Al as a Rambo-inspired character. When he mentioned this, someone told him that they were actually friends with Sylvester Stallone. Al was able to get a hold of him and explain what they were doing. He loved it, and Al asked him if he would be interested in doing a cameo for the movie. Al was thinking having him play the worker in the booth as he goes to hop in the helicopter would make fans laugh. Stallone was on board and agreed to be in it. When it came time to shoot the scene, unfortunately, Stallone's schedule was completely full and he wouldn't make the time to do it. What could have been...
They're so stupid!
The production found a mall in Tulsa, Oklahoma that was being turned into an office space. They thought this would be perfect and used the new office spaces as the interiors of U62 and Channel 8. Other empty spaces in the mall offered them places to use as sound stages to build sets for the TV shows that would be filmed for the station. A hotel was nearby, which made it very easy for the production to save money on transportation for the cast and crew. Everyone was able to arrive on set on time, and if they needed more wardrobe, they could visit some of the still operating clothing stores. While the film was full of funny scenes and the cast had a great time filming it, the production did run into a few issues. When they were filming the Gandhi 2 skit, it was supposed to show Gandhi slamming a goon's head into the top of his Ferrari. The production had secured the vehicle for the shoot and were wary of it getting damaged. During the shooting of the scene, the stunt guy actually ended up making contact with the top of the car, which left a very real dent. Everyone began to panic as they didn't know if the car was covered by the studio insurance. Tensions were relieved when it was confirmed that minor damage would be covered. For Wheel of Fish, the production team bought real fish at the local fish market the morning of the shoot. The set designer then began attaching them to the prop wheel around 6 a.m. as they wanted to make sure the wheel would properly spin with the added weight on it. It worked perfectly, so they were satisfied. Unfortunately for them, they were filming in Oklahoma in summertime, in a building that wasn't air conditioned, and filming didn't start until around 4:30 p.m. As you can imagine, after you fill the space with over 100 extras and turn on the hot lights, the set began to smell horrible. During the DVD commentary, you can hear Weird Al describe the day as ripe. The film is famous for introducing the world to the Twinkie Wiener Sandwich, a hot dog put on top of a Twinkie to act as the bun. Then it's topped with spray cheese, which we then see George dunk into his cup of milk before he takes his bite. To film this scene, Al had to eat 7 of these. The only real injury on the set came from one of the more ridiculous scenes. When George is doing his first episode of Uncle Nutsy's Clubhouse, he tells Bobo the Clown to look up, look down, and then look at Mr. Frying Pan. Unfortunately, Al didn't pull back on swinging the frying pan enough, and actor David Bowe got hit right in the face. He ended up with a split lip. His response in the rest of the scene is in fact real. Luckily, the red clown makeup covers up any blood from his split lip. When they checked the scene, they all thought it looked excellent, so they didn't do any more takes. So in the film, you are seeing someone actually get hit in the face with a frying pan. When the production team was filming the Spatula City skit, they erected a real billboard along the highway. After they were done, they left the billboard up, as they figured the advertising company would just take it down when they sold the space to another business. For months afterward, it stayed up. People would actually take the exit and ask other businesses about this Spatula City. People working in these other stores got so annoyed with all the questions, they finally complained enough to get it taken down. During the Indiana Jones spoof opening of the film, they decided to make the treasure he was after an Oscar statue. The problem was that the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences take themselves very seriously and didn't appreciate the comedic tone of the film, which was the whole point of the joke. They wouldn't allow them to use an exact replica of the statue. So they created the comedic version where the man on the statue is covering his crotch. One of the most famous skits from the movie is Raul's Wild Kingdom. Actor Trinidad Silva would bring to life the character of Raul Hernandez, a normal guy who enjoyed teaching people about the crazy world of animals. He also had a few crazy ideas of his own, teaching poodles to fly being one of them. The character of Raul was supposed to have a bigger role in the film. Sadly, halfway through the production, Trinidad was killed by a drunk driver. They didn't know how to proceed without the beloved actor. A scene was supposed to be shot where the flying poodles would get their revenge on Raul. They filmed the scene using a double and had poodle puppets covering the double's face. It was ultimately decided not to include it in the film and let Raul's role finish up with what had been filmed already. He was supposed to be part of the telethon at the end, but those scenes were dropped as they didn't feel right trying to film them after Silva's death. The film is dedicated to him in the end credits. The only thing left to create was the computer-enhanced music video that takes place in the middle of the film. Al wanted to do a parody of the Beverly Hillbillies theme song set to the song Money for Nothing by Dire Straits. Al is known for getting permission from musicians to parody their songs, even though it is legally not required of him. When he met with Mark Knopfler, the lead singer seemed turned off by the idea. He eventually relented under one condition. He had to play guitar for the song so that the riffs that the original song was known for would match. Al loved the idea and having a great guitarist on the song, so he immediately agreed. Then lawyers got involved and insisted the song be called Beverly Hillbillies / Money for Nothing. Weird Al has publicly stated that he hates the title, but went along with it to get the song moving forward. They shot the music video and did it as a shot-for-shot remake of the Dire Straits video. At least it turned out pretty good. The film was finally done and the first edit came in at 2 hours and 30 minutes. Orion Pictures wanted something more in the 90-minute range, which was standard for the time. Al agreed as he felt it was indeed too long. Later, fans would ask about the possibility of a director's cut being released of the film. He said it would never happen, as the material that was cut out of the film didn't work for the film's pacing. Later on his website, he would say, "There's a reason those things got cut." When it came to the title of the film, Al wanted to call it The Video. Orion pushed for the name UHF. The always forward-thinking Weird Al thought that calling it UHF wouldn't make much sense. The world was moving more towards cable TV, and the audiences wouldn't know what the term UHF or VHF even were. Any future sales of the film might not even understand that UHF and VHF used to actually stand for anything related to TV. Already outside of North America, the designation of UHF wasn't widely known. He was overruled and the film became UHF. although in other markets it would be released as The Vidiot from UHF. They began to test the film for audiences to see if any additional changes needed to be made. The audiences they gathered loved the film. This gave Orion Pictures high hopes for the movie. The financially struggling studio hoped that this would be the movie to save them from bankruptcy. To take advantage of the upcoming film Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, Orion put out a teaser for UHF that only used footage from the Indiana Jones spoof opening of the film. You don't even know it's a Weird Al film until the very end where his face is revealed. Since Orion was pushing the film to be their saving grace, they released the film in the summer of 1989. This proved to be a giant mistake. The crowded summer box office steamrolled over this film. Released that summer were blockbusters like Last Crusade, Ghostbusters 2, Lethal Weapon, License to Kill, When Harry Met Sally, Do the Right Thing, Weekend at Bernie's, and the box office champ of that summer, Batman. There was no room left for a little comedic parody movie, and it died. The movie was released on July 21st and was out of theaters within a month. Orion Pictures would announce their bankruptcy in 1991. One thing Weird Al didn't like about the film's release was that it was slapped with a PG-13 rating. The MPAA wanted to cut the scenes with the flying poodles and part of the Conan the Librarian skit. Al refused to make these cuts to get a PG, and so it ended up with a PG-13. He felt that the Conan parts were bloodless and he didn't understand why they're getting so hung up on them. The film ended up being released straight to video in the UK, as he was pretty much unknown in that country. The film would come out on video in the US and Canada, but since the film underperformed in theaters, a small run was only ever created. It went out of print rather quickly. This is when the film began to find its audience thanks to video stores and airing on cable. Soon the tapes were impossible to find and were even selling for hundreds of dollars. In 2002, MGM released the film on DVD. The week it was released, it was a top 10 bestseller. It would make its way to Blu-ray thanks to Shout Factory in 2014. Fans have asked Weird Al if he's ever thought about doing a sequel. He says he had considered it, but thought that the film was, quote, a product of its era, and comedy has changed so much over the decades. With media sensibilities now where most audiences watch videos on YouTube, and studios being wary of producing a film like UHF, he has stated that it would realistically never get a sequel. But the impact of the film has shown up in quite a few places. Al himself referenced the character George Newman in his video for the song Word Crimes, and the characters of Mordecai and Rigby try the famous Twinkie Wiener sandwich at a food stand in the Cartoon Network show Regular Show. While the film didn't set the world on fire, UHF did help an entire generation find its comedic style and helped certify itself as a cult classic. If anything, a lot of boys on the playground got in trouble for yelling, "Stupid, so stupid," at each other, which in itself makes the film legendary.
I'll take the box! The box! You take the box! Let's see what's in the box!
Her pretty head.